And we're back.
So where did we leave off? We made it through.
Where did we?
You were just watching it.
We made it to the boat. Well, actually, I went to get a glass of water.
Yeah.
Made it to the ship. We had a couple of troubles when we
Did we make it
first.
to the ship?
Yeah.
I thought we just made it through training.
Made it to the training. Made it to the ship.
Yeah, because
couldn't get the radio to work.
Yeah.
Because two things weren't connected. What were the two things that weren't connected?
The freak meter and the transmitter.
Sorry.
Yep.
My bad.
So we'd gotten there. He'd got that worked out. I don't think we had taken off yet, right? Were we still at dock or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
Because they had to bring in that person to fix it.
Yeah,
so you had to still be at dock.
That's 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Okay. So let's just catch up. So what time frame are we at? What year is this?
This would be 1943.
2. Has to be.
Is it?
3. Remember I was telling you last time we had another year in there.
Okay.
I joined the Navy in September of 42. Now
Okay.
this is a year later.
Yep.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
So is it around September? Is that around where we're at?
Right.
Of 43. And then just to we got to get back in the environment here. So what was going on around that time, not just with you, but politically within World War II, within politics, within
World War II was at its height. See, we lost World War II for a year at least. From Pearl Harbor, defeat was every day. The first action against Japan was the retaking of Guadalcanal, and that stopped the Japanese advance. And then in January of 44, we started taking back. And that's where the turning point of the war was.
Besides the war, was there anything notable going on at that time? I mean, or was that just what everybody was following?
Oh, the war occupied everybody and everything.
Yeah, that's all you ever hear about from that time period. So I was just wondering
Yeah.
if there was anything else going on that,
Yeah.
kind of gets overlooked.
Well, I mean, these days, if there's a war, there's still music and movies. Were there anything, or were people making music? Were people doing things, or was it just all focused? I mean, or was it just less?
Well, yes, you're right. They made movies and music, and the trains were running and so forth and so on. Life went on, but primarily the big thing was to defeat Germany and Japan.
Isn't that the time of Elvis?
No.
I thought he went to World War II. No, he went to Vietnam.
Yeah, that was in the 50s.
Okay.
So did people? Now I don't quite know, but I know there were movies a lot, and a lot of people went to movies and they saw that's how they got their news, their video news. Did a lot of people just go to the movies to see that kind of stuff?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You're right.
To kind of get a visual of what's happening?
Right. It was all on regular film, of course.
Right.
But
No TV at that time, right?
no TV.
Yeah.
Not like we have today.
Radio was a very big thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to... You have the ability to make a video?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay. I'll give you a video called The Nightmare Years.
Mm-hmm.
It's about William L. Schuyler.
Mm-hmm.
And he was in Berlin in the late 30s, just before Pearl Harbor. And it makes a good history of what was going on in the world. And some people was involved in the war and other people were not. But everybody was looking forward to the day when things would go back to normal. And then a guy by the name of Eisenhower gets on the radio and says, "You're never going to go back to normal."
Mm-hmm.
And that's true. Today we're in a situation of extreme danger. If I was to ask you who the 12th Inman was, would you know who the 12th Inman?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Were there a lot of like pacifists back then? Were there a lot of people against the war, or was pretty much everybody on board?
Oh, you'd be a traitor to be against the war.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not like the 70s where everybody
Yeah.
was anti.
Well,
Right.
I think the difference is, now we get into a lot of wars where we don't need to get into them. World War II
Right.
seems like that was different. That
Yeah,
seems like
because they attacked us.
Yeah.
that seems like a morally justified war.
Yeah.
When you're going to war to defend yourself or to defend others.
Yeah, we had pacifists. Taft was one of them that not going to get involved in any war.
Yeah.
There was rumors going around that Roosevelt forced the Japanese to bomb Pearl Harbor. In other words, he made the treaty so difficult that Japan was forced into bombing Pearl Harbor and then World War II.
I had read somewhere that prior to Pearl Harbor, that there was not a lot of support for the war because they'd come out of World War I and nobody wanted to repeat that again.
Right.
Yeah.
But so Pearl Harbor really was the turning point in that. Then that's
Yeah, we were
your
trying to
perspective.
stay out of it.
Yeah.
No one could deny the war after Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mike, to answer your earlier question about films and stuff, I saw a documentary on like Walt Disney, and Snow White came out in I think 1939, and so Snow White did really well, and then his next couple movies did really well, and then when the war hit, his movies started. I mean, they none of them did as well for quite a while, and he was just bankrupt because they cost so much money and stuff, and nobody wanted to see them because they had a war going on. Right. So, the movies that were coming out, people didn't go see as much. I mean, you had your movie reels, but you still are your news reels and stuff, but people didn't go see just any movie.
It's fascinating.
So when you're listening to the radio for news, do you get? I mean, we're used to 21st century. I know what happens 30 minutes after it happened anywhere in the world.
Right.
I'm guessing that there was a much larger delay.
Oh, that's true.
I mean, are we talking? Are they telling you about things that happened yesterday, or last week, or last month, or particularly for things that are going on in Europe? I'm just curious what that delay was.
Well, you didn't have transatlantic cables or anything like that.
So how did you get information from Europe at all, other than, I don't know?
Bring it by ship.
Wow.
Also.
Okay, that's going to be a delay then.
Right.
And at that time, how long did it take?
Oh, much.
It's on the wall.
Hold on.
At that time, how long did it take to get from Europe to America via boat?
A fast ship could do it in 5 or 6 days.
That's not too bad, I guess.
Yeah.
You just got to turn the temperature up and give it a couple minutes, and it'll turn back off.
Feels nice, but I don't think we want
Yeah.
to listen to it.
When I lived in Germany, we watched the news on the opposite time period. So you watched the morning news at night, and you watched the night news in the morning because that's when they aired.
You mean when you were watching American
News.
Okay, yeah.
So, we didn't get the news quickly. And that was 30 years ago.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like
30 years ago.
Sounds like you were
30
getting
years
it
ago.
quick, but you were getting it.
Yeah, I mean, you were getting it. You were getting a 6-hour delay basically, because
Oh, okay.
that's how long. I mean, that's the time difference. I mean, so you're getting a delay.
Yeah, but when you watch
Yeah.
the nightly news, are you watching it at the same time that I'm watching the nightly news?
I don't think so. I think we were watching it. I don't know.
I don't know if it's actually delayed or
Phones.
Because-
Oh
I
yeah,
have no idea.
it's delayed definitely.
But yeah, back then, okay, so you're at least a week behind on any news that's even coming over the radio.
And the other thing, was there a lot of like when the news came back, even if it was bad, was it reported not as bad to the American people?
Oh yes, there was an effort to downplay
Right.
a lot of the bad news.
Do you know anything in particular you can think of that you remember something bad happened, but the news kind of reported it differently? If you don't, that's fine. That's it's quite
That's what's going on now.
yeah. So
that's always going
yeah,
on.
I guess true. So going back to so we're getting on your ship and we're getting out, and that's right. I remember we talking about you actually getting shore leave for a week and you missed your ship. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, he went home.
Okay, now let's go back now.
Okay.
The ship went in commission at Todd Erie Base in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Then we took a shakedown cruise up the East River. That's where all the fancy apartments are. And the captain deliberately brought our ship over as close to the shore as he could so that we could see the people and the people could see us. And we all had to stand at attention in our dress whites, and it was quite a... People was honking their horns and waving at us and so forth. It was quite a deal. Anyway, after our shakedown cruise, we went to Norfolk and picked up the small boats, 24 LCVPs, landing craft vehicle personnel. And these 24 set in davits on the ship. And that was and of course we had troop quarters on the ship. So we could take soldiers or Marines to anywhere in the world and dump them on the shore. And that was the function of the APA. And so after we got our small boat cruise, we were there at Norfolk for a short period of time. I remember I went to Washington, D.C. and went to the top of the Washington Monument during the war.
Which I don't think you can do anymore.
No, they shut it down. And so then we was ordered, we didn't know it, I didn't know it, that we were going to go to the Pacific. So we left Norfolk in a huge convoy. And then during the night, they peeled off the 4 transports and the 4 DEs. And we went south. The big convoy went to Europe. And did I tell you the story about turning on the radar and seeing the target following us?
Mm-mm.
Well, at that time, we were just another APA.
And right now you're in the Atlantic heading south?
Heading out toward... We were supposed to go through the Mono Passage, that route through the islands down there. And we got word that the Germans had a submarine laying in the bottom. So we had to divert and went through the Windward Passage to get to Panama. But the first night out, this was the first time that the equipment had been fired up. So I could play with the radar. So I turned on the SC, surface search radar, and never intended to see anything, but the radar laid out the convoy just like you could take a pencil and lay it out. 4 DEs in a fan and 4 transports in a row. And we were the last one. And but I didn't expect to see anything. But when I got 180 degrees from our heading, here was a target, a little blip, come up, be there for a little bit and disappear. Come up, be there for a little bit and disappear. So I got on the sound-powered phone, called the bridge, and said, "There's something following us." No. So the officer of the deck come back, because he had to leave the bridge to see. He came back, and he said, "You're right, there is something following us." So he called the captain, and the captain called the convoy captain, and we all went to general quarters. Bang, 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 all hands man your battleship, battle stations. And one of the DEs was detached from screening and started back. The minute that DE changed course, started back, the target disappeared and we never saw it again until the next night. And the next night, there it was again. It was an American submarine that had joined our convoy, and each night he had to surface to charge his batteries. And but no one had been informed of that. And the war fell through the cracks. So when we got to Panama, we found out that it was an American sub. But
I didn't know we had a lot of American subs back then.
Yeah.
oh yes,
And if they were part of the convoy, is there any way they could talk? Or were submarines not allowed? They couldn't talk because they're underwater? I don't know.
oh yeah, they could talk with another submarine.
Oh, okay.
We didn't have. You have to have an assigned frequency to cover it. And we didn't have any frequencies to talk to submarines. But we got to Panama.
That seems really dangerous. Like,
I know.
yeah, I mean, that seems really dangerous. I mean,
For the sub.
I mean, you guys could have
Yes,
went after him.
Sure.
Golly.
But
Thought you were going to say we turned around. There was this guy in a rowboat out there.
Just following along.
when we got to Panama, we went through the Panama Canal, and if you know, a ship doesn't go through the locks on its own power. They have little electric locomotives that pulls you through the locks, and they just have a cable that hooks and pulls. Well, as we were going through the locks, one engine slacked off and the cable come off. So now we got one locomotive only pulling. So it pulled us right sideways into the canal. And we made a big gash along the canal. We left our mark on the canal.
Wow.
And when we got to the Pacific side, then they broke us up into just transport and a DE. And we come up along the coast of Mexico, and we ran into a Japanese sub. And our destroyer escort chased him all over the Pacific. And we got to San Diego.
So that was your first encounter with the Japanese? Is that sub?
Right.
And how exactly do you chase a sub? I mean, obviously, when it's up, you see it on the radar. I'm guessing it wouldn't be up a lot.
Well, their
Need sonar, don't you?
best defense is, of course, to go to the bottom and lay on the bottom, because your sonar will not pick it up. And sometimes you chase the whale, too. And so we got to San Diego, and the comm officer checked my record, and he saw that I never went to boot camp. I went directly from recruiting station to active duty, in effect. The Navy didn't do that. A normal person enlisting in the Navy would go through 21 days of orientation, and then they would give him a boot leave, and he would go home for a period of time. So we got to San Diego, and I had to get the spare parts all made up, and that's a story of its own. You're going to use this video to show people how dumb I was.
No.
Is this a story of you not having the right dress uniform?
No.
No, okay.
No, this is about a vacuum tube called a klystron. Magnetron. I'll get it right yet. Magnetron. And it was highly classified. And I had already, in messing with the radar, had already wrecked a magnetron. You had to have air on it all the time to keep it cool. And I burned up a magnetron. So I had to requisition a replacement when we got to San Diego. And I got the requisition all typed up and signed. And I had to go downtown San Diego to the supply depot. And I went down there, and they said, no. The only one that could pick up a magnetron has to have a sidearm and be an officer, which I was disqualified in both. So I went back, and the next day I went back down, and with a note from the captain to give me a magnetron. So I went down with a bunch of radio, and I got the magnetron. They put it in a paper sack, like a grocery sack. And
You didn't drop it, right?
I was often left in a bar.
Mm-hmm.
We stopped on the way home, and
For a while.
when I got up, I went off and left it.
Did you ever get it back, or?
Oh, yeah. When I got back to the ship, then I realized what I had done. So I had my Liberty card always. I was the only one aboard ship that could leave the ship anytime, anywhere. So I went out the gate and got a taxi and went downtown to the bar, and there it was. Right.
Wow.
Otherwise, I would have probably been in the brig for life. But anyway, so then on about the 22nd of December, we still hadn't got our troops aboard. And the comm officer told me to go put my dress blues on and come up to the radio shack. The two of us went up to the captain's cabin.
Did you say come up to the Radio Shack?
Yes, that's what it was called. That's why we have Radio Shack. I know.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
there was a radio shack, and the radar shack was on one story above.
Okay.
So
And-
the Radio Shack, what was the difference between the Radio Shack and Radar Shack?
Radio and
Okay, so
radar.
radar and radar.
Radio and radar. Okay.
Okay, gotcha.
Right.
Did you have a
And-
sonar shack too?
No,
No.
we didn't have sonar.
Okay.
That's a story of its own. But
Okay.
we went up to the captain's cabin, and comm officer didn't even knock. He just walked in and said, "George." No, No one would dare call the captain George but him. He was the captain's private lawyer, and he said, "This boy has not been home since he's been in the Navy, and we're going into a war zone, and he could be killed. I think he should be allowed to go home before we sail." Well, it was already, we knew we were sailing New Year's Day. So,
And so that's when you went back home
right,
for that month.
right.
Okay.
For
No,
a week.
Just for
Oh,
8
just
One
for a
days.
week.
8 days,
One week.
Supposedly a week.
That's right. Yeah.
And so I got 8 days leave, the only one on the board the ship that got 8 days. Everyone else got 4 days. And
And you didn't make it back in time, if I remember the story correctly.
Mm-hmm.
right, when I got home, your Aunt Lucille, Aunt Mildred, they had plans, you know, I was a celebrity to them.
Mhm.
They thought so. And I messed around till I couldn't possibly get back in time for the sail. And you know what that would have entailed if the DuPage had sailed without a technician. It wouldn't have been good. Anyway,
So when you got back, did you make the ship, or was it already gone?
no,
It
I got
waited for
back
you?
at 11:30, and Liberty expired at midnight.
Gotcha.
I had 30 minutes. So I got back on time. And then there was an altogether different atmosphere aboard the ship because we had close to 1,500 Marines.
Mm-hmm.
And the ship's crew had breakfast and dinner and supper, and the Marines only had a mid-morning breakfast and a mid-afternoon supper.
So
You
how many Marines were on board versus how many Navy?
It's 1,500.
I would say close to 1,500.
And then how many was the Navy? How many people were Navy?
'Cause you've got Navy and Marines?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
The ship's crew was about 750
Oh, really?
So you had half as many Navy as you did Marines.
Marines. Yeah.
Wow.
Marines was everywhere.
And they only so the Marines only get fed twice a day, and the Navy. No wonder the Navy's always told they're cushy. Being in the
Well-
Navy is supposed to be a cushy job, like the Air Force versus the Army. You know, the Army is supposed to
Right.
be. You know, the Air Force is supposed to be a cushy job.
Well, I was smartest thing I ever done was
Not
join,
become a
not
Marine.
join the
Become a
Marine.
Marine.
Yeah.
Or you might say the dumbest thing you ever did was to join the Marines.
right. And
There's probably a court martial because you never showed up somewhere.
Well, no, he didn't sign. He
Didn't swear in.
didn't swear in, so he's safe.
yeah,
You just owe them a free lunch. You owe them
Yeah.
that lunch.
all right. Yeah, we had a supply officer that was a lieutenant commander, and he was allowed to draw rations for the sailors, and he was allowed to draw rations for the Marines. Estimated how many meals they would be aboard ship. So he would requisition steak, for example,
Mm-hmm.
against the Marines, but Marines never saw the steak. We ate the steak after they were ashore fighting for their lives. War is hell. And so we sailed New Year's Day for Honolulu and for Pearl Harbor, and there was a Marine aboard ship that was a radioman in the Marines, and he sent and received messages in code, and so to keep his fingers in, he would come up the Radio Shack, and all the radiomen on duty, they couldn't talk with him, so he spent a lot of time with me, and we got to be good friends or good acquaintances, put it that way. And when we dropped anchor in Pearl Harbor, one Marine came up on deck. There were many on deck, but this one Marine was on deck, and he looked around. He made a run, jumped over the railing, dived into the bay, and swam ashore. And they thought, well, that's the last we'll see of him.
Mm-hmm.
The next morning, here he come, swimming back to the ship. And they didn't do anything to him. After all, he's going to be shot the next day. So anyway.
How did you get back on this ship? I mean.
Well, we had a gangway.
Oh, okay.
And the only one that was supposed to go ashore was the Commodore and the captain.
What's a gangway?
Gangway is a portable set of steps.
Oh, okay.
Goes down to the water. It can be raised and lowered.
I was thinking of a ladder. I mean, I think
Yeah.
of old pirate gangways where they
Yeah,
just throw
those-
a rope over.
yeah.
But I guess that makes sense a lot better.
Yeah, and so then we left Pearl Harbor, and
So that guy never got in trouble.
no,
Because they figured he was going to be shot the next day. We just need more fodder.
so we went to the Marshall Islands.
Now, where are the Marshall Islands at? Obviously,
They're west of,
Japan.
they were given to Japan. You see, Japan was on our side during World War I. And so they gave the Marshall Islands to Japan back in 1918 or 19. So they've been fortifying this island ever since. But an atoll, A-T-O-L-L, most of them are coral, and coral grows in the salt water, but when it hits the air, it stops growing. So these coral islands are just flush with the top surface, high tide. And they distinguish that from an island that has mountains or hills. And so the Marshall Islands were just atolls. And the Japs had been fortifying them since World War I.
Now you said you left on New Year's Day, and that was 1944. D-Day
Right.
hadn't happened yet, because D-Day happened in June of '44, right?
Right,
Okay.
right.
Sorry, I was just trying to get the
No,
timeline right.
you're right. And so we only had 2 working carriers. So they were there, and they dive bombed this island and killed a lot of Japanese. And then the battle fleet showed up, and we had 2 or 3 battle wagons by that time that had been recommissioned, and they took their 16-inch guns and worked over that island. You would have thought there would be nothing left. When we pulled in there, it was just like a tropical paradise, palm trees, and after 3 or 4 days of shelling, it looked just like you see in the newsreel, where it's debris everywhere. And so on D+1, that means D-Day, 1 day later, I got a message that the Marine General needed a radio on such and such frequency. They
Okay.
had,
went back up just a second. So D-Day happened over in the Atlantic Ocean, or was
Right.
that?
No,
we
'cause
think
that,
of it.
That was, yeah.
That went
Yep.
from
there was a lot of
England to
D-Days.
France, right? England to France. Is that the D-Day we're talking about?
No, he's saying there were a lot of D-Days.
Well-
Yeah.
D-Day just means the day that the operation
Yeah.
Okay.
started.
Yeah, I think it's somewhere around in there the definition of D-Day changed. I think
Gotcha,
going
okay.
back historically, it meant the day of the operation.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
But the D-Day that we think of was such a large D-Day that it's kind of ingrained
makes
into
sense,
our culture
yeah.
as being
This-
the one and only.
The turning point of the war. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you say D-Day, you don't mean the D-Day in Europe. You mean
No.
Where you attacked in the
Okay.
Marshallans D-Day?
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
that's what I was trying to figure. Okay, so we tacked D-Day +1.
And
Thank you, because I was like, wow, we just skipped 6 months.
so I got a message that the general, the Marine general, needed a radio on such and such a frequency. Now, these radios were made of 3 components: a transmitter, a receiver, and a battery box. And so I had to get a SCR 610. These were crystal controlled, so you had a box of crystals. You'd start with a crystal and tune it. So I got this transmitter receiver ready to go, and now I had to get ashore. So they had an LCVP that was taking hospital supplies, stretchers and operating table and all this crap. And so I bummed a ride, got to the island. Jumped off the LZPP onto the land. I landed on what remained of a Japanese that had been blown to bits.
Mm-hmm.
Just his hip and leg. I got sick.
Yeah.
He'd been there for about 5 days in the sun. And so I found the beachmaster. He showed me how to get to the general, and I traded radios. Gave him the right one, and I took the wrong one back. And I started back to the shore. The island was only about a mile across, so it's not a big place. And I ran into the Marine. "What are you doing ashore? Let me show you." And he took me on a sightseeing tour.
Mm-hmm.
And I was too dumb to. Here I was in just dungarees, no rifle, no sidearm. And he started showing me. And we went inland, and there was just debris everywhere. And we run on a number of Marines that were just right where they were killed. The Marines had not even been gathering up their wounded. They're wounded, yes, but not their dead. So we passed a number of Marines that had been killed that night, just a few hours before. The Japanese had fortifications way below sea level in the coral, and they waited till dark, and then they come up behind, in front, side. There were Japs intermixed with Marines all across the island. And the Marine General had asked for naval fire support. Well, you know, naval gunfire generally has an arc to it. Well, the island was so flat that they couldn't. In other words, their guns were useless.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, they ordered in a couple of destroyers. They had 5-inch guns, and they tried to pinpoint. And the fire that night killed more Marines on that island than the Japs killed us. And So anyway, this Marine and I were somewhere on the island. I have no idea.
Were you supposed to have gotten back to the ship?
I was supposed to use common sense.
Okay.
Yes.
So
you were
yes,
right.
he was supposed to be on the ship.
But once I got away from the shore, I had to stay with this guy because he had a gun. And
It seems an odd situation that you're in a battle zone without a weapon, but
it's dumb, yes. And so we were going around the island. I've got a map of the island in there to show you. And there was a big blockhouse with no windows, solid concrete blockhouse. And inside there was 2 GE diesel marine generators which furnished power for the island. And as we came around the corner, I was face to face with a Japanese Marine. He was about 6'6", and there he stood.
Big Japanese dude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow.
It was. It took me a second or two to realize that he had died standing up.
Oh, God.
He was standing on one leg.
Oh, my gosh. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. You got me all like, oh.
He had died standing up and bled to death. Anyway, we went from there
That
on.
take the wind out of you?
probably took a few things out of him.
Yeah.
I wish I was backboard ship. I'll tell you. And so we kept going, and we
Good
found a
thing he
safe.
wasn't wearing the white dress uniform anymore.
Oh.
Now this sounds like a lie, but it's not. We found this safe. It was about the size of this table, about a yard cube, and it had been blown out of the building, and it just plowed a gravel furrow in the coral. And this guy, I'll call him Joe, said, "Hey." So he went back to some of his dead friends that had TNT packs, and he brought 4 of them up, and he knew all about this, how to do this, and he put it on the door of the safe and lit the fuse and hollered, "Take cover!" Where are you going to take cover? But anyway, he blew the safe, and he said, and it was full of money, Japanese money.
Mm-hmm.
10 yen notes and 20 yen notes. He said, "I'll take the 20s and you can have the 10s. So I dumped out the batteries out of the battery box and filled the battery box full of 10 yen notes in packs of 100.
What's a battery box?
Did you need that battery?
Oh, yes. The batteries furnished the power for the transmitter and receiver.
So, was that important to have on the ship?
It was very important. Your transmitter and receiver didn't work. Oh,
Right.
you mean, well,
For you
Did
personally
you
at that
come
moment?
back and get them, or
well, I had a number of radios aboard ship.
gotcha? So you had
Yeah.
enough.
I had enough. So anyway, I filled it full of 10 yen notes, and we went into bunkers. See, the Japanese had slaves. They had Koreans, and these Koreans lived an existence, I guess you'd say. Most of them were dopers.
Mm-hmm.
They smoked opium and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I got an opium pipe in there that I got off of the Marshall Islands. Anyway,
We have to see all this afterwards. Yes.
I finally got back to the ship, and I went up to the Radio Shack, and I started giving my friends a pack of 10 yen notes.
Mm-hmm.
100 bills to a pack. Well, here come an old ship fitter. I didn't know him, but he'd been aboard ship, and he gave me $2. And he said, "Would you sell me one of those notes?" I said, "What's the $2 for?" He said, "Well, a 10 yen note is worth $2 in Japan." Oh, I'd been given
100 at a time. Yeah.
100 at a pack. And so I gave him, I didn't take his money, but I gave him so there's 10 yen notes still available. Your Aunt Nancy has a few left, so if you want, tell her you want to have access to the,
That's crazy.
yeah.
To the stolen money.
So when you were on the island, did you find like their radios or anything else? And did you like take some of their technology and try to figure it out, or what, is that a thing? Or
You're right. What you're saying, yes. There was, the Navy had special engineers that examined all of the defenses. For example, radar was new, but Japan had radar, and it was mounted on a running gear, about like a farm wagon, only with tires. It was rubber. And the Japanese, in order to get reach, they had hoisted this thing up on the roof of the powerhouse. So when I saw the ladder, I climbed up on the roof of the powerhouse, and here this guy was disassembling and making diagrams of the Japanese radar. And he gave me several ceramic resistors, and I don't know what become of them. But that was my example in initiation into the war.
Well, I was also curious. You said there were a lot of Marine casualties, and you didn't have a gun. Did you go grab one of theirs?
could you?
Well, I would have if the Japanese was after me. Fortunately, they left me alone. I guess they decided I wasn't dangerous.
So you had a couple of close calls, but it sounds like up until now, you personally weren't in any kind of close combat.
No.
Luckily. You almost were with the guy in
The dead guy.
the dead guy standing, but
Yeah.
Now, when you took that, were there any ships on that island of theirs, or was it just an island that was? I mean, what was the kind of fortification they had? Was there any ships? Did they have tanks or any kind of artillery? I mean, what did they have?
There
Or do
was
you know?
no tanks. I never saw any guns, really. This was the headquarters. And the main Japanese force at that time was at an island called Rabaul. Rabaul was down off the coast of New Guinea. And the Japanese had made that into a super powerful base. And so the powers to be, I guess it would be Nimitz, I don't know. When we secured Roy and Nimmer Islands, then we got orders to proceed westward, right, directly toward Rabaul. And we were decoy. They were hoping the Japanese fleet would come out to destroy us, and then our fleet could destroy them.
yeah, you were bait.
We were bait.
Back when you were on the island, I was going to ask one final question. How long were you actually off the ship? I mean, we were talking like hours, or were you there like overnight? Or
Oh, no, just ours.
okay. And I'm assuming you could hear things going on.
Oh,
Everywhere.
yeah, there's
Were they still
firing
taking
everywhere.
the island? Okay.
Sure.
So at this point, they've finished that battle, right? You've gone back to the ship. And you're going towards, what was the name of the other island?
Rabaul.
Rabaul.
And fortunately, somebody had brains enough to know that if we got entangled with the Japanese fleet, we would cease to exist. So they finally ordered it to turn around and go down to Guadalcanal. So Guadalcanal was secure in that we had destroyed the Japanese army on the island, but all the waters around Guadalcanal was still controlled by the Japanese. We had taken Marines and dumped them on the shore, and then our ships had turned around and fled because that's the only. If they had stayed there, the Japanese would have come down and destroyed our naval fleet. But we pulled our fleet back and left the Marines in effect.
To fend for themselves.
Right. And so when we got to Guadalcanal, it was still a case of watching out for the Japs. And but it was the turning point of the war when we took Guadalcanal back from the Japanese. Guadalcanal had been a British possession. They had raised pineapple for copper, what they called copper, making soap. And when we prepared Henderson Field to make it an air base, we had to pay England $75 for each and every pine tree that we took out. So England was a money-making.
At this point, they needed all the help they could get.
Right,
Yeah.
right.